Okay, so hello one more time. It's 12, so we are starting the third presentation, whole D. Please, Joe, the ground is floor. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hey, it's a nice little room with a few people, so hopefully this will be quite a nice, intimate view on things. First, let's start with. There you go. So yeah, the topic of the talk is a Unity 5.6 feature overview. There's actually an incredibly huge amount of stuff in Unity 5.6, as I'm sure many of you will be aware. So I'll cover some of the basics and go into a bit more detail in some of the other things. Yeah, that's the basic idea. Just to get an idea, how many people are you already using 5.6 in production for things? Okay, and how many people are using a previous version of Unity? Okay, and not yet made the leap to 5.6. Well, hopefully by the end of this you'll be thinking, you know what, maybe it's worth it. There may be some features that are useful, and there's also some kind of useful tips on upgrading as well. So I am Joe Robbins. I'm an EMEA community evangelist. And I've been at Unity for about 8 years now, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about how things have changed over those 8 years. When I first joined Unity, I think we had pretty much just launched iPhone support, back when iPhone was only one type of iPhone. It was the first iPhone. And we had a separate editor for Unity iPhone and a separate editor for Windows and Mac. So yeah, I've been around for a little while. When I first joined Unity, I was doing technical support and all of the technical support, because I was the only person that was doing it. So support@unity3d.com was kind of my alternative email address at the time. And oh, how things have changed over those years. Today, also, yeah, I'm now a dad as well. Hooray! Thank you. That's more recent news. So obviously the first thing you do when you have a child is put a Vive tracker on them. Yeah, ultimately it was kind of useless because all the baby does is kind of just sit there and move slightly every now and then. So there's not really much to track. But yeah, this whole presentation is just going to be a sequence of picture of my daughter looking shocked and surprised. But yeah, although I would love it to be that, I'll get on to some actual content about Unity. So Unity 5.6 launched on March 31st. So it's been out for a little while, and we've also released 5.6.1 since then with various improvements and fixes. Yeah, so it's been around for a little while now, and it's received a number of updates. So let's just get into the depths, I guess, and we'll start off with lighting, which is one of the key focuses of 5.6 in some ways. So there's a number of big additions, perhaps not necessarily in order of how big and important they are there. So the Light Explorer is probably the least big and important. I should put that further down. But the Progressive Light Mapper, or Progressive Light Mappy, as it shows there, is one of the big new features in Unity 5.6. Has anyone used the new light mapping stuff? Good? Yeah, great. Excellent. There you go. That's a perfect endorsement. Let me give you a little bit of an overview of basically how it works. So the thing to bear in mind, so obviously building light maps in Unity is something that can take a very long time, which was something that we wanted to address because it just takes far too long. And although it's great to be able to set a light map going and then maybe go and have a coffee or some lunch or just go home and sleep overnight and then come back. We wanted to try and improve that workflow so that you could at least get an idea of what's what's changing and what's updating a lot faster. So in order to do that, we added the progressive light mapping system. So if you go into the lighting tab, as you would do normally, you can now toggle it from enlighten to the progressive preview. It's currently still in a preview state, primarily because of the fact that until it reaches kind of feature parity with enlighten, it's kind of not done right because we're not matching the same features. But that being said, there is a fair amount of functionality already in there. So what it does, let me see if I find a little spot. So the basic idea is it gives you the opportunity to see the results of your light mapping experiments faster. So if I just enable auto generate down here, you'll see that it's starting to prepare a bake. Ta-da. And it's starting to bake. So instantly you're seeing results in the view, which are progressively getting more and more higher resolution. You'll also notice if I zoom out that it's focusing purely on the view frustum to begin with. So I don't know, I can focus in on a little section here and I say, I really want to see what this corner looks like with my new light mapping settings. And then it will focus on that view frustum and keep iterating and iterating and iterating. So you get to see those changes and updates really quickly. And that's kind of the whole point, really, of the new light mapping system. Obviously, then other sections will slowly be populating in and out as well as you go. But yeah, it just gives you the opportunity to quickly change things by looking up close at them, modifying them, changing them, and then yeah. So, for example, what we could do is make use of the new Light Explorer, which is another new feature in 5.6, which is a tab. Well, it's a new window, and I've got it dropped in down here. And what the lighting tab allows you to do is just organize your lights a lot easier. So instead of having to track them down in the hierarchy and tweak them, you can now find them all and modify a lot of their values directly in the tool there, which makes things a lot easier. So for example, I could go and change the color of my main light in the scene, make it kind of like a dark blue. So okay, it's nighttime now. And then instantly you're seeing the results of that in your light mapping super quickly. Ta-da! So yeah, that's the progressive light mapper in a nutshell. There's a lot of other features to it and a lot of depth and complexity. But you can hardly see that as well, can you? Excellent. But yeah, so that's the new light mapping stuff in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot more to it than that as well. In addition to that as well, there's also a kind of return back to our mixed mode lighting, although it's kind of mixed mode lighting plus, because there's a lot more complexity to it now. So those who are not familiar, mixed mode lighting is basically how you handle transitioning from real-time lights and real-time shadow to baked lights and baked shadow. And back in the days of the Beast light mapping system in Unity, we had a number of different ways of handling that. So in the distance, everything would be perhaps light mapped, and you'd walk up close, and everything would be real-time shadows. So now we have, various ways of handling mixed mode lighting now, which is great. And if I go on to the next. So the next one, next addition to Unity that you may not have already tried out is the new NavMesh workflow and a low-level API. So there was a lot of feedback with the new NavMesh system. A lot of it that I heard specifically was from folks that were working on kind of roguelike projects or procedurally generated stuff that didn't necessarily work for them because of all of the editor time baking that was required as opposed to any runtime baking. So that was taken on board, and just a few other tweaks and approaches to how you would want to have NavMesh applied to your scenes and set up. And the main two of those is the new NavMesh surface and the NavMesh links and this new low-level API. And in addition to that, it's also available via our GitHub as well. So yes. What we've got here is the new NavMesh surface. It's not quite fitting on the screen so well, but basically the concept now is that you have this NavMesh surface script that you attach to things, With the old system, it was kind of tied to your scene as opposed to your individual assets. So you can kind of have individual nav mesh surfaces. And you can have those separate nav mesh surfaces associated with different nav mesh agents as well. So if you wanted to have, say, some lumbering huge beast that has a different way of navigating across your terrain, you could then have a small creature or human, for example, running around inside doorways and passages that the other nav mesh surface doesn't allow. So obviously, yeah, you can define what agent type is, and the height, and all of the values, and the radius values, and all those kind of things of the agents, and have that applied to all of your mesh, which is super good. The other advantages of that as well are that you can then have these systems and have these pieces of geometry set up to be then baked at runtime and have more like procedural content, which is super. There's also the nav mesh modifier. So that allows you to define different types of terrain in a hierarchical kind of way. So, for example, here there's the small red section there, and that's a piece of geometry that's being defined as lava. So obviously, humans perhaps can't run through lava, but maybe lava monsters are perfectly fine in the lava. Or you could perhaps give a penalty to your health value as you're running through lava or something. I don't know. Well, it's lava, isn't it? So it's gonna hurt if you go through it or something. But the idea with the nav mesh modifier is that it's based on hierarchy as well. So any parent in a hierarchy is going to be, so if you have the nav mesh modifier, you're going to say everything in here is lava, then anything below that in the hierarchy is going to become lava. So you can have, complex hierarchies that are kind of dominated by the modifier. And further down inside of that stack, you could kind of have an additional nav mesh modifier. So you could have, say, like the lava modifier at the top, and further down you could have, say, a stepping stone in the nav mesh in your hierarchy and give that an additional nav mesh modifier, and that would kind of override the further up the scale. So yeah, that's nav mesh modifiers, quite handy. The next is a nav mesh modifier volume. So similar, although instead of working on a hierarchical basis, you define a volume, and then that is applied to all of the nav mesh within that scene, within that area. So obviously here, it's kind of set up as a door, for example. So obviously, what it's done is it's kind of intersected in the mesh, and during the mesh generation phase, it said, right, this whole section within this box is a door, or it could equally have been lava or whatever you want it to be, really. So yeah, it's a lot more flexible, and there's a lot of cool new stuff with that. And then finally, nav mesh links as well. So these allow you to link multiple nav meshes together, and it can also link from one nav mesh to a completely different type of nav mesh, so entirely different ones. And the big advantage of this is that it allows you to define kind of a width for your nav mesh link as well. So here, obviously, what we've got set up is a jump across from one side to the other, but the agents can choose to traverse that link anywhere along the width of that link. So they could come in from, say, down the stairs and to the left and jump over, or they could like move right the way out to the end of the platform and then double back, but still be able to find a way across and not having to just jump across at a set defined point. So yeah, that's the nav mesh links. If you go to this URL, you can get hold of them. Just take a moment for people who want to kind of write that down or look at it. And yeah, that's got documentation and everything. So that's a good place to go if you're interested in navigation. So the next one is the Postprocessing Stack that we added to Unity. Traditionally, we had a whole bunch of different image effects that were added into Unity, and they could be all kind of stacked onto your camera, downloaded from the asset store or other places. And what we've done now is replace that with a post-processing stack. So instead of having to worry about whether your depth of field is above or below your specific image effects in the correct order, it automatically does that for you. So I've got a small demo here with that one as to how you set that up. So we've got the same scene as we had before, and I've got my main camera here. And if I go to Add Component and Effects, there's this new Post-Processing Behavior. And what that wants is a Post-Processing Profile, all of the Ps. So I've already got a Post-Processing Profile set up, but you could also just create one from new as well. It's just there in the Create tab, Post-Processing Profile. And if I just drag this new one across, pop it there. So now we've got that applied to our scene. And this Post-Processing Profile asset has all of the different settings that you'd want to play around with. So obviously I've got some depth of field set up here, so I could modify the focal point of that depth of field, change the aperture, that kind of thing, all relatively easily. But there's a whole suite of different effects: ambient occlusion, anti-aliasing, bloom, eye adaptation, motion blur, all kinds of cool things. The motion blur is really cool as well. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that. Color grading as well, chromatic aberration. So all of the kind of standard effects that you'd want. Yeah, and it's quite expandable as well. So yeah, that's the post-processing stack. Fairly easy to set up and fairly easy to play around with. And here's a few examples of how it might look in various scenes. I have no idea about color grading, but there's a little section in the bottom corner there that looks incredibly technical. The next thing is Vulkan support. You can't deploy to Spock, unfortunately. This kind of Vulkan is supported in 5.6. Terrible Vulkan Star Wars, the Star Wars Star Trek based joke. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Vulkan, but there's a little video to kind of show the improvements in performance and also power consumption as well. Video support. So video is something that has been needed to be improved in Unity for quite some time. So I'm sure if anyone's had to do any kind of project that's had some heavy video content, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your pain that you've had to go through with that. It's perhaps been a problem almost as long as these were a relevant way of recording video as well. I'm not sure how many people in this room actually even know what video cassettes are. It makes me feel incredibly old. Like, what is this strange thing? Yeah, analog times. In terms of video, I'll show you a quick demo here. It's set up slightly differently to how it used to be. So I have a quad here. It's just a simple quad with an unlit material in this case, just an unlit texture material. And I have a new video component with a video player, and I'm also going to add an audio source as well. I'm going to drag that audio source into there, and I'm going to define a video clip as well, maybe this one, and reassign that. There we go. So yeah, it's a whole new video player. It's a lot more useful, and the quality is incredibly, well, just a million times better really. So it supports 4K resolution, all kinds of different video codecs, as opposed to just, I believe, it's like the OGG video codec that we used to support. I could watch this entire video, but I've got more things to demo. It's quite nice though. I'm going to have to stop it. I'm sorry. It's an open source video you can download from the interwebs. So, but yeah, vastly improved. And yeah, any kind of video content now can look a hell of a lot better, and you've got a lot more options for compression and how you want to run things. So, hooray! Finally, one of the things that we've been meaning to fix for quite some time is a box ticked, which is good. For now, at least, until they invent a 1,000,000K video, and then we'll need to upgrade things. But so yeah, 2D improvements, some fantastic pixel art there by myself. That actually, hilariously, was part of a Hack Week project that we did at Unity, way before they were even called Hack Weeks. I think at the time we used to call them Ninja Camps. Yeah, and this was actually for a prototype we made of a graph-based scripting system, believe it or not, that never actually saw the light of day. So there was this incredibly cool 2D kind of ninja fighting game. So you had like nice double jump mechanics and shurikens that you could throw at each other. But you could also hit those shurikens into walls and jump onto the shurikens and use them to climb up. So it was actually a really cool and fun game. But it only ever existed in a build of Unity that didn't have the ability to build. It just had this one branch that had the kind of sketchy node-based system in it. Aww. So one day these ninjas will rise again and actually be part of a game, maybe. So there's quite a lot of 2D improvements, many of which are included in the 2D experimental preview. So if anyone's been taking part in the 2D experimental previews, they're all of the improvements from there are kind of slowly making their way into the main branch, which is cool. So for example, there's the sorting with groups, which allows you to define your sorting by groups, believe it or not. And it's one way of sorting your 2D assets. And then there's also the axis distant sorts as well, which allows you to use an additional axis just for sorting, which makes things a lot more flexible. And some horrendously horrifying zombies there, with very strange mouths only at the side of their faces. It doesn't actually open at the front. There's also a lot of new automatic tools for your in the sprite editor, 2D sprite editor. So both the ability to define the meshes of your sprites, but also automatically guess as well with reasonable accuracy as to the kind of outline you want with your geometry, which is cool. And finally, 9slice has made it through into the main branch as well now. So yeah, you can 9slice your tiles and sprites and move them around and scale them all nicely, like you would expect to be able to do in a modern 2D game engine. Yeah, so that's nice. There is actually a huge amount of 2D physics-based additions as well, which I have not included in this talk because there's literally so many of them. But the 2D teams have been working really, really hard on Unity, and a lot of that has made its way down into 5.6. So yeah, really good stuff. All kinds of like compound colliders improvements in particle physics in 2D and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, really useful stuff. And speaking of physics, there's also been some improvements in the regular physics as well, in terms of this new physics debug view, which is quite handy if you're working on a very physics-heavy project. So you might open up this scene. Hey, it's this one again. So what I've done is I've added some of these kind of radio towers here, and they've just got some simple capsule colliders and rigid bodies attached to them. So if I hit play, they all collapse to the ground and roll around a bit with physics, which is fine. But if you're working on something and you really want to kind of work out a lot more what's going on with your physics, we now have this new physics debug window, which you can then enable in your scene view. So we have all of the rigid bodies are now colored. You can define exactly what color everything is. So we've got static colliders as red, trigger boxes as yellow. You can define all of this. You can also define the variation as well, which is kind of cool. So you can kind of tweak it more and more to be some crazy looking Alice in Wonderland psychedelic madness. But it allows you to just slightly differentiate between each of the different objects there. There's lots of options for hiding and viewing various things. But yeah, one of the most useful elements really is the ability to kind of, for example, define what color sleeping objects are. Because obviously if you're trying to optimize the performance of your stuff, being able to see what's sleeping and what's just kind of sitting there, still being calculated needlessly. So for example, this one now, you can see has gone to sleep, as you'd expect. Whereas these are kind of like slowly rolling along, not doing much, which isn't amazing, I guess. Still not stopping. So you might, for example, want to go in, modify those, give them a bit more kind of angular drag or something. Maybe do that. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. And maybe that will work. Let's see. It would help if I turned the physics debug back on. There we go. Da-da. So now this one kind of stops, goes to sleep. That one's already slept, but then something else comes along, and now they're all asleep now. So yeah, it just kind of makes things a little more visible, a little more easy to kind of get your head around what's going on, and to, easier to debug what's going on in a crazy system with loads of stuff instead of having to set up all of your own debug raycasts flying everywhere and like, did that work or did that not? So yeah, that's a handy new feature. There's also Text Mesh Pro support, kind of, in a way, which is great. So now, who was using Text Mesh Pro before? Who did I? 1, 2. Okay. So yeah, if you've been doing anything text heavy in Unity with our previous text solution, I'm sorry. But yeah, Text Mesh Pro is now free on the Asset Store, and we're working with the Text Mesh Pro guys to implement things. I said guys, guy. Yeah, so here's a little comparison video. thought for a second then that was going to start looping around. Right near the end, it looked like it had looped. Yeah, Nintendo Switch support was added in 5.6, which is cool. There needs to be more games on the Nintendo Switch, I reckon. So yeah, we've already had the Super Bomberman and Sniffer Clips, which were made in Unity. But yeah, more Nintendo Switch content, I think, is out there. There's a lot of people that want more games other than just Zelda, I guess, and Mario Kart, which seem like the two titles right now. Facebook Game Room as well is now supported with 5.6. So if Facebook is a target platform for you, that would be one to check out. Also, Cardboard and Daydream are supported natively in 5.6, so that's good. Lots of platform type stuff there. It's also worth mentioning the Collaborate beta. How many people use source control? I guess that's the starting point. So many people don't use source control. Well, we have a solution for you. So yeah, Collaborate beta, it's currently in beta, is a kind of Unity solution for, I guess, kind of reasonably lightweight source control. It's handy if you're working kind of on a project on your own or with maybe one or two other people. I believe ultimately the idea that it would be scalable to be a lot more kind of production ready for larger teams. But currently in its beta state, it's really quite handy for just smaller scale projects. I've been working on a number of little projects with folks at Unity, and we've just used Collaborate to work on it, and it's been quite a straightforward and fluid solution, actually. So yeah, I'd highly recommend checking it out at the very least. It's currently in beta, so if you just go to that URL, you'll be able to check it out. And it just allows you to store all of your project up on our cloud and be able to then trigger builds from it and everything as well. So it's kind of tied in with our build pipeline. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I would recommend it. It's just a lightweight solution for having some kind of reasonable backup and source control. Because if you're not doing any source control, you need to do something. Yeah, so a small URL there. So if you've not yet decided to take the plunge to upgrade to 5.6 because you're worried it might break and that's the last thing you want to do at this point in your production or for whatever reason, there is an upgrade guide. We do upgrade guides for every major release, and that kind of goes over everything, all the known issues, all of the things that you might expect to have to deal with, and any major changes to the code base. So we try to be as transparent as possible in advance. So if you are considering it, that's definitely the place to go at first to see if it's worth it. Because if none of your stuff is touched when you do it, it's worth at the very least switching over. And there's also the release notes as well, where you can get a real deep look into things. It's inevitable that whatever project you're working on, there's obviously something incredibly important to you specifically. And obviously there's no way of me knowing all of that in advance. So yeah, a bit more detail is available on the release notes. And yeah, thanks. There's my Twitter, and I guess I've got some time for questions as well.
Do you have any? Okay.
Hi, so you mentioned about Vulkan in terms of mobile and efficiency. What about Vulkan in terms of VR? Is that going to be improvement? Is that a path to take when upgrading to 5.6? Or is it not yet in that
possibly state? I'd have to double check. Yeah, I'd have to double check with you with that one, but I would think it's a possibility. Like, you know, if you have those improvement gains with Vulkan anyway, I guess it all depends on what platform you're targeting and whether or not that support has been integrated yet specifically to that platform. But yeah, we could chat about that, and I could figure out exactly whether or not you'd see those benefits and improvements. Because if it's built in, you know, just general Vulkan support, it may just work. But it's yeah, we'll see.
Hi, I have actually two questions about Collaborate. The first one is, will there be, because I've already used Collaborate since the beta announced on Unite, and is there any information about implementing branching systems to the Collaborate?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's something that's planned, just not currently yet in the beta. Yeah, I could check with the Collaborate folks and get back to you. I'm here for the next couple of days as well, so I'll either be at the Unity booth downstairs or around, so I can follow up and ask the right people, and you can catch me.
And the second question about Collaborate is, I know that you're working on a visual merge system for scenes and prefabs. And do you have any ATA or something?
Not.
Will it be in a few months or a few years?
I'm probably not the best person to ask about the ATA on that one, but again, that's one of the ones that I can ping the team. So yeah, either I'll be at the booth, but there should still be some of my cards at the booth as well. So if I'm not there, you can pick up a card and email me. But I'll chase up on that after the talk and figure out some answers.
Thanks.
To those ones. No worries.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, I got a question regarding the video component, the new updated component. What's the supported platforms on the mobile with this new updated component? Is it fully supported right now?
As far as I'm aware, yeah, it's just fully supported.
There has been no issues with iOS anymore?
Sorry?
So playing videos on iOS Mesh would be possible?
It should be, yeah. It should be possible as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, so Joe, thank you very much for this nice presentation.
No problems.
And
Thanks.